It's time and we have a quorum. We can resume the meeting. The next item of agenda, item number 3, proposed establishment of changes arising from the reorganization of the Department of Health with immediate effect upon approval of the FC to take forward new statutes being introduced to step up protection of public health, as well as new initiatives and expanded services relating to Chinese medicine, disease prevention and health promotion, and strategic information technology development. On the 18th of February this year, the government consulted the Health Services Panel. We have with us Ms. Elizabeth Chair, Permanent Secretary, Food and Health, Mr. Howard Chen, Deputy Secretary for Food and Health, Dr. Constance Chen, Director of Health, and Dr. Amy Chiu, Deputy Director of Health. And I now invite Dr. Chen, Mr. Chen to speak now. This item was discussed on the February of 18th this year in the Health Services Panel. This initiative is, this arrangement is to step up protection of public health, as well as new initiatives to and expanded services related to Chinese medicine, disease prevention and health promotion, and strategic IT development. And we are not against this initiative being forwarded to the Finance Committee. Members have expressed concern about the number of non-directorate posts being created, and we think that there should be performance indicators, especially regarding the Chinese patented medicine, the effectiveness. And members also noted that the DH will only establish a supernumerary post for oral consult, dental and oral services to fill a frozen post in dental care. The administration, the members urge the administration to respond to this on this issue. Any questions from members? We don't have enough quorum. Elizabeth Quack. I'd like to ask concerning Chinese medicine. Now, there will be new initiatives to expand Chinese medicine services, and we just paid duty visit to the Yangtze River Delta, and we visited some services for distant Chinese medicine services. Now, we know that many elderly people in Hong Kong like to utilize Chinese medicine services. Now, if there are more of these distance services, the elderly don't have to travel so much. This should apply both to Chinese and Western medicine, and this will alleviate the burden on the hospitals. Now, for Western and as well as Chinese medicine, do you have such directions in mind. Now, let me tell you about Chinese medicine, how we promote that. But now, this term of government pays much attention to development of Chinese medicine, and we have a Chinese Medicine Development Fund. Now, some of the funds will promote scientific research and development. This will help to raise the standards of Chinese medicine in the long term. Now, I don't think I will need to go into the details of that now, and then I'll ask the director to speak. Now, on distant application of Chinese medicine that hasn't been discussed in Hong Kong, the discussion has begun. With regard to Western medicine, there are concerns about moral and other issues. But I believe this is a direction of interest to the Chinese medicine sector as well. Now, whether it's for health promotion and prevention or for treatment, I think both Chinese and Western medicine, we want to alleviate the burden on the hospitals, and in the future we will have 5G, and we will develop a smart city. We make use of internet, AI, and technology to promote health in both Chinese and Western medicine. So I think that's a necessary direction, and we are always trying to catch up, but we can jump the queue, or we can leapfrog. We don't have to follow a certain fixed order of progress. Now, we have to catch up with other cities. The DH in the application of technology on smart healthcare tends to be lagging. So please be more far-sighted and have a look at the pace of development in other cities and try to learn from them. If you are doing the things that you have always been doing, and you may be lagging in your thinking and in your approach. We need smart government and smart officials. So the DH can also be a smart DH. The PS, we agree with this direction. Thank you. Any other member wishes to speak? If no one is going to speak, I'd like to put this item to a vote, but we do not have enough quorum. We have to ring the bell. A quorum is necessary. We have to ring the bell. Let's ring the quorum bell.
同時開幾個會？
We will put this item to a vote. Mr. Ho, please be seated. We will put this item to a vote. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous. I declare this item endorsed. Anyone request separate voting in FC? No? Thank you. We come to item number 4. The proposed creation of one permanent post of AOSGC in the transport branch of the Transport and Housing Bureau. It will be a D2 post with immediate effect upon approval of the FC to take forward various new initiatives for enhancing public transport. Now, on the 18th of November last year, the government consulted the transport panel. We have with us Mr. Joseph Lai, PS for Transport and Housing Transport, Mr. Kevin Choi, DS for Transport and Housing, Ms. Amy Che, Assistant Commissioner for Transport, Bus and Railway, Ms. Candy Kwok. The transport panel chairman is not a member of this panel and he cannot attend this meeting, so I will briefly go over the discussion by the transport panel. Now, at the meeting on 18th of November last year, this panel discussed this item and it's not against this item being forwarded to the FC. Members expressed the concern that the duties of the new post mainly involves taking forward time-limited new measure and it can overlap with an existing PAS post. So they asked whether when this permanent post is created and it's not time limited, whether there would be a review of the existing PAS post. Dr. Kwok. Now, the Transport Advisory Committee recently approved that patients can board buses with condensed compressed oxygen. Now, this is not available on minibuses, but but we're talking about buses. Now, over 8,000 patients with respiratory problems need to make use of oxygen tanks. But the government has been lagging over so many years. These patients lack means of transport. They cannot secure the services of rehab buses because the resources available are very limited, but there are more patients which require this kind of service. Many of them on CSSA, some of them they have TB, they get a small amount of living allowance. Now, it can be seen that the public policy is poor and it hasn't taken into account the public's needs. Now, the example, I quote this example to show that our government is not progressive enough. And of course, bus safety is an important issue. unless without the major typo accident, the government wouldn't be paying attention to this matter. And now the government has come up with a study report. Now, what is involved is over long working hours, etc. And we've talked about that in the panel, but the government still is being very, very slow. Now, I'm very concerned, given this attitude, whether it's oxygen flasks or other safety equipment. Now, what would this new post be able to do, or rather, what else would the government come up with to help? Now, when would people be able to take a bus without the risk of without putting their lives at risk? The PS. Now, concerning oxygen tanks, now there are different pieces of legislation regulating different modes of public transport. Those who need oxygen tanks, they are affected differently on different modes of public transport. For oxygen tanks, we hope that this can be improved, so we will amend the legislation and put it to LegCo to allow patients to carry oxygen tanks onto buses. We will talk to patient groups, to the bus companies, to the unions and the fire services to come to a general agreement, and we hope the LegCo members can support the initiative. On bus safety, we have always tried to improve it, and the judge in his report has tabled many proposals. Many of them have already been in progress by the administration. The new proposals have also been taken on board by the administration. Now, I ask about the time.
Yes, Mr. Choi, thank you for the question. The Permanent Secretary answered on the judge-led independent committee and the 45 recommendations provided. We are implementing all of them now. Some of them have already been implemented, and there are also proposals to carry out the cost-benefit analysis. We answered questions before the LegCo meeting, and we're happy to report to you the latest progress. Okay, first round, Yu Siwing, Holden Chow, and Ho Chung Yin, and Fernando Zhang, Wu Chi Wai. Yu Siwing now. Thank you, Chairman. I want to ask about the ferry. I support the creation of the post because there will be a number of land, sea transport planning coming up. As for the post concerned, it's supposed to study the water taxi service and central to Hong Kong Ferry. And the public and the tourism sector supports the plan, and we hope that the water taxi service can be commissioned as soon as possible. And there are some places where exact locations have been identified, but not all places are confirmed. I wonder, for water taxi service, the pier and the exact locations in West Kowloon, I think, when can you confirm all their locations? I know there are parking places at West Kowloon Cultural District, but I think you can give us the concrete locations, those information, then the center will be able to submit tenders. So locations, have you finalized them for the piers? And also the commissioning date, when will we know the time? We do look forward to the provision of water taxi service so that Hong Kong can have one more choice for tourists. And also pier facilities. For some old piers, there's street sleepers staying there, affecting, the impression we give to tourists. And also for people taking the ferry, they find that it is not so nice. So will this post look into both the hardware and software of piers, and would proposals be made to make improvements so the public piers can be more appealing and have better hardware? So improvements can be made? Who would answer? Mr. Choi or Mr. Lai, PS? Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Mr. Yu for your support for our water taxi service. As for the timetable, ultimately, well, it all depends on whether there are interested operators, but our preparations are being made now. Our goal is that by 2020, the second quarter, around then, we can launch the service. I hope that there will be operators on board by then. As for locations, basically several points: Kai Tak, Hong Kong, Tsim Sha Tsui East, West Kowloon, and Central. This is the basic provision. If the operators are interested in adding more points, we are very happy to listen to their proposal. But we do hope that it will be market-led. So the more service points there are, the better. Mr. Choi, would you have any supplements? Mr. Choi? DS? Thank you. Yes. As for the facilities at the pier, we will follow up on that. As I mentioned, we will discuss with the sector. Hopefully, we can have it handled in a flexible way, because water taxi cannot be offered in the same frequency as cross-harbor ferries. So we need to liaise more with the sector. And for the facilities in individual piers, if there's a need for upgrading, we will discuss it, collaborate with the relevant government department. So, Chairman, I was asking about the, particular pier facilities for water taxi service, because that will be different from the usual ferry pier. So I hope that you can listen to the views of the centre and let the centre know what are your basic requirements for those piers, because the government will be responsible for building the piers for water taxi. So I hope that you can let us know what your requirements are, so not wait till very near the time for submitting tenders. And also I was asking about the presence of street sleepers at pier. Would this person holding the post look into that, or would you have to wait till other government department can resolve it? As for street sleepers, I'll ask colleague from the Transport Department to answer, please. Who would answer? On street sleepers, once we identify any of them, we would follow up the case with the relevant department. Mr. Yu, if you have any concrete cases you want to share with us, please let us know. I do. Okay, I'll let you know. Next one, Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. In the paper, the Post has the duty to handle the future of the public light buses, the real-time arrival information for green minibus. But I want to point out, for the real-time arrival information display system, right now, some bus companies are already using it. But let me tell you, the Bureau, that you may have heard from many district councillors that they may have told you that a so-called real-time arrival information system isn't that reliable. So many district councillors said that maybe from the bus company's perspective, they would think that is due to all sorts of service arrangement. They cannot really provide a very, very accurate real-time system. So now you can see that in the case of bus services, there are these difficulties with ensuring real-time information. So how can you, not to talk about, green buses, mini buses, I'm sure you have the post and you can provide a better enhance the signal system for the transport system. That's something good. But when you launch real-time information for green minibuses, I want you to review the existing system for buses. That how are you going to monitor the system to ensure that the bus companies provide better services? Many councillors, district councillors, must have told you as well. The system isn't reliable at all. So you call it real time, but it's not really. So what are the options do you have to monitor the bus companies to make sure that they really provide a reliable system? Who would answer? Chairman, I'll say a few words first. This system, as you can see, is a self-learning system, and it relies on external information provided so that the system can reflect the real-time arrival facts. But there are so many buses in Hong Kong, and there's always traffic jams across Hong Kong, and all sorts of external factors could cause a delay. So what is supposed to arrive in 5 minutes could end up being 6 or 4 minutes. So the information needs to be constantly adjusted. But of course, when we provide this for the green minibuses, we will use the experience in the bus services to see. Well, definitely there's room for further adjustment, but the point is how to adjust it. But we will make reference from the case of buses. Okay, Mr. Choi, supplements? Yes, the PS just explained the structure of the system and how we can improve it. And I understand that for franchise buses, there is room for improvement for the real-time arrival information system. I sit on the board of bus companies, and we do care a lot about ensuring the quality, including the information system of bus companies. So we'll monitor and we will follow up on it further. And as for the green minibuses, it's a different industry. For green minibuses, is run by various parties. So we would suggest that the government can invest in a system. Therefore, the government will have stronger control over it all to ensure, as the PS said, that sure that users' feedback will be incorporated, and we will take reference from the experience of the bus services. Okay, follow-up question, Chairman. Just then you were saying that, as the PS said, you rely on external information to update the real-time arrival system. We did reflect that, and we get the same answer from bus companies. But let me tell you, when monitoring the bus companies, would you have a system so that should there be any complaints against certain real-time arrival information system for some routes, would you be able to, in the case of the most complaint against routes, ask the bus companies to make improvements? Honestly, because they don't have enough bus fleet for some routes. So arrivals are not reliable. Arrival time is not reliable. So we can get the bus companies to make improvements. Yes, I'll follow it up. Next one, Stephen Ho. I know that the government lately has got more work in relation to transport, and the paper says that, you need to, of course, you need to get more people to work. Well, in this paper, it mentions we're also solve for most of transport, public light buses, water taxi, and even subsidy for the Western Harbour crossing. But do you need to create a post like 3 years after you have finished the various tunnel services before you can actually, how are you going to handle all the work, outstanding work? When the West Harbour Crossing, ends up being returned to the government, because in your department you must have people doing the monitoring and also installing new safety systems already. So can you explain to the public why the need for more posts to do what you're already doing? And there are sometimes limited work which will be done in a few years' time, and so why the need for the post still by then? Mr. Lai? I will say a few words first, and then in the paper lists out various initiatives. Some are time limited, as Mr. Ho said. For example, the minibus is longer in length, and but for some others, work is long term, and we need to keep reviewing some services. For example, particularly the safety of franchise buses. What we're going to do now is that besides the judge-led committee's 45 recommendations alone, some of the recommendations are continuing work for us. For example, the working hours, rest hours of drivers. We've promised that a year after the implementation of the guidelines, there will be a review. But still, I think beyond that, we'll continue to have to do review. And how buses can make use of technology and arrangements to further improve its safety, that's also part of our continuing work. And you may also be concerned about the public transport subsidy scheme. And we have promised to have a review a year later, so that's also part of our continuing work. So whatever the outcome of the review is like a year from now, I believe that in the days ahead, there are still a lot of work to be done by colleague to make continuous improvement. For example, now we're using Octopus. In the future, with the advancement in technology, I'm sure there will be other payment methods. So how are you going to work out the various payment methods in terms of giving them the transport fare subsidy? We may not give them back the subsidy through the Octopus card, but maybe through means like e-wallets and so forth. So there's still a lot of work that will continue to be done, and that will add to our workload. P.S. Any more supplements? DS? Thank you, P.S. And Mr. Ho, for your question, supplements. Currently, we do have PAS who are helping me to deal with public transport. All the operations of public transport and services are actually handled by me as DS, and as the PS said, for some safety devices, new devices or proposals, and also on the public transport fare subsidy scheme, I do need new hands to help me deal with them all. And in the future, if there's an uneven distribution of work, well, I will review that, should that be the case. But right now I can see that, particularly for the public transport fare subsidy scheme, I can expect quite a lot of workload in the days ahead. Okay, supplement. So I think you need to, on my question, I think you need to review it right now. The PAC, I've got a PAC on the Labour Department. I found that after it's opened many projects and they added new manpower for various projects. But then, for some old schemes, existing projects, people originally doing them have been allocated to handle new projects, and they haven't reduced any total establishment. I'm just worried that within the government, because in your bureaucracy, the division of work, when there's new assignments, you hire new people. But then you haven't reviewed the manpower need for old projects. Even in your post, the paper created for the establishment subcommittee, the paper itself doesn't mention what you are doing now. So I hope that in your establishment within the government, besides creating new posts, you need to have a periodic review of your existing manpower structure so that you come back to this subcommittee or go back to LegCo to brief us on your latest manpower situation, like in the entire Transport Housing Bureau or Transport Department, to see whether they are cost effective. For old projects, if there's a surplus of staff, you need to cut the staff. And if for new projects that need new manpower, they could be met by internal staff deployment. Okay, thank you. Next one is Fernando Zhang. Just then, Kwok mentioned that people with respiratory lung diseases, they may need to carry the oxygen tanks with them when they're out. So as for the public bus ordinance 14A, section 14A, the amendment of that, Chairman, well, it's really sad. I am chairman of the Subcommittee on Long-Term Care. In December 2017, we had a meeting, and the paper then, CB bracket 246171801, the government promised back then that they would carry out an amendment, and they even said that the amendment would be within the year 2017-18 be tabled to LegCo, and that the actual operational guidelines would be provided. That was back in 2017, and looking back at the records, in 2012, indeed, back then, the government had come to the transport panel and promised CB bracket 1504/111201. The government promised back then that the administration had, within the year, submitted amendments to LegCo to have negative rating. That is to allow the patients to carry oxygen tanks to the franchised public bus, oxygen cylinders to the franchised public buses. So, Chairman, I'd like to ask you, well, as a chairman myself, I don't know whether officials here were at my meeting back then. You had promised that you would make that happen. You promised. That was in 2012 in black and white. In 2017, black and white. It's written down. In 2019, and now you're asking us to create a post. I want to know who was being negligent here. Over the past 7 years, what had you done?
邊位答呢？
主席，
Who will take this question? Well, I would like to defer to Mr. Choi for the details. As I have said, in relation to the amendment to allow oxygen cylinders to be brought on board buses, it involves many stakeholders, fire services, patients, bus drivers, and bus companies. 7 years ago, we needed a lot of time to sort out the matter. Mr. Choi. Yes, if I may explain the matter. Well, in fact, we have already arranged for this item to be discussed at the coming meeting of the Transport Panel in May. In other words, the administration is sincere in launching this initiative. As the PS has said, well, we encountered developments that we had not anticipated, like having to take up the matter of guidelines with certain government departments. Well, if I may also clarify a point, for the proposals included in today's item, they don't include the carrying of oxygen cylinders. We have already prepared the plan, and then we will go to the transport panel. Well, I don't know how many times they are going to repeat the answer. I want to know who should be blamed. In year 2012, you went to the transport panel Well, we were even told that it would take the form of negative vetting. In other words, you had already completed the drafting. You've been sitting on it for 7 years. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? In 2017, at that time, you already promised that it would be introduced in the LegCo. 2 years have passed. You have gone back on your word. You are still asking us to give you money to create the posts. How many more times do you have to repeat your answer before you can achieve anything? P.S. We have given you an account, as Mr. Choi has said, at the upcoming meeting of the Transport Panel. We are going to have another round of discussion with you on oxygen cylinders. We are fully prepared to come back with the legislative amendment. Well, it's outrageous. Can they get away with such an explanation, saying that they have unforeseeable difficulties, and so they have been able to stall 7 years? Well, you take up the matter on other occasions. Today we're here to talk about creation of posts. Well, the post holders haven't done their job properly. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, I read the paper, and then 6 major areas have been listed in the paper. Just now, the Permanent Secretary told us that most of the issues are time limited, other than 2. First, enhancing the operating safety of franchise buses. Second, public transport fare subsidy scheme. Only these 2 items would need the continuous attention of the officer. Does it mean that now that the judge had come up with recommendations and you're not able to implement them in the coming 3, 5, or 7 years, in other words, you need a permanent post to continuously follow up on the recommendations? Is that what you're trying to say? Permanent Secretary, maybe I didn't make myself clear when I answered the first round of questions. I didn't say that most of them were time limited. I was answering Mr. Stephen Ho's question. Well, it is a fact that indeed for some issues they are time limited, but then others are long-standing issues. And I cited 2 examples: enhancing the operating safety of franchise buses, and then public transport fare subsidy scheme. And then for the real-time arrival information, let me finish with my answer. For franchised buses, well, the officer involved would of course have to follow up on the 45 recommendations from Justice Mr. Michael Nunn's report. It is going to be a huge area. There will be issues to be taken care of on a continuous basis. Even if we're able to complete the follow-up work on the 45 recommendations, there are still other issues. Say, for example, application of new technology, application of new IT to enhance safety. Can I stop you? Well, when you talk about establishment proposals, to talk about new methodologies and new technologies, I asked you for specifics. You never gave an answer. And then after securing our support, you get away with it. Well, maybe you simply ask for funding to pay a officer for 3 years, 5 years. And then if the need continues, then you come again. Now, there is this franchise bus toll exemption fund. Once it has been exempted, how much, what other work would be needed? And then for the relaxation of the vehicle length restriction of light bus, are going to relax the length continuously, and then having the ferries, recommissioning the ferry route. What else do you have to do after you have completed the task? Well, for the application of technologies, you sound as if it is a difficult task and you need a permanent post before you can urge the minibuses to have real-time arrival information. But in fact, we can rely on Google Map information to find out where the bus is. Probably we need something acting as an intermediary to provide some links. Is it really that difficult? Why are you saying that it has to be needed continuously? Please tell us what will be done in the coming 3 years and what else will be done in the next 3 years. Secretary, Permanent Secretary. Well, installation of hardware, of course, isn't the most difficult part, though it is not easy. What is important is to continue to apply technology and grab the opportunities brought about by technological advancement. For the enhancement of bus safety, it is a continuous job. I don't think we can stop after 3 years. I didn't say that you could stop. Please don't put words in my mouth. I have to stop you because I didn't say that we have to halt anything related to safety. I simply say that after implementing the recommendations of Michaelin's report, you can come back to ask for the retention. Don't get angry. Well, he was putting words in my mouth. Well, we've made a start on the basis of the report of the judge, and the work has to be continued, and we are not restricting ourselves to the 45 recommendations. There is a continuous or ongoing need. I'm sure you want us to do it on an ongoing basis. You don't want us to stop just because of the time limit. No, I'm not asking you to stop. I simply say 5 years and then 5 years and then another 5 years, just like the previous paper. Mr. Wu, you can wait for your next round again. I think I'm also as optimistic as Mr. Wu. That is, if you completed the task, then you move on. For the real-time arrival information for green minibus, I am not confident because as of today, there are still many people who are saying that for certain bus routes, we don't actually have genuine real-time information. Well, they don't give the real-time information at the bus stop. Sometimes a trip is lost, but they put up a show to disguise the fact that the trip has been lost. Yes, bus companies should gradually address the problems, but then for real-time arrival information, it has taken a long time, and still there are many outstanding issues. For minibuses, well, before the TD implemented the policy, there are already mobile applications in the market covering certain minibus routes. Now you want to take over the job and you want to collate the information. I hope you won't repeat the problem with bus companies. For some minibus operators, sometimes they may go to another route, so your technology should accommodate such switches. And then for real-time arrival information, how many commuters are you able to attract? And then are you going to open up the data for other users? In the light of the experience with bus companies I don't have confidence. Now, you want to create a post to take care of this matter, right? And then for water ferry service, it would be good if we can commission the service. However, how are you going to award the contract? How can you make sure that it is going to be feasible and that there will be enough patronage? There are many question marks. For water ferry service, in your paper, you cover quite a large number of destinations. Now, even if you're able to cover the entirety of the Victoria Harbour, what about Kowloon City, Sai Wan Ho, Lei Yu Moon? We have got ferry piers. And then along the coastline, there are also other landing steps or similar facilities. I'm going to consider them as well. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Au, for your favorable comments. For the water ferry service, we have to test the market. So we are going to have a pilot scheme. Earlier on, when I answered Mr. Yu Siwing's question, I've said that in Q2 of 2020, we are going to launch the pilot scheme covering 5 destinations. But we have an open mind. If the contractor would like to call it more piers, we can consider them. We have to try it out on the basis of a pilot scheme, and then we know whether there is a market for such a service and what adjustments we need before we roll it out to the entirety of Hong Kong. For the real-time arrival information, I am fully aware of your concern. There's still a lot of work to be covered in the case of franchise buses. We'll learn from the experience before we move on to the green minibuses. Well, we have the proof of concept work. This is the stage where we are at. We want to carry out a pilot scheme covering 400, 500 green minibuses. The participation is voluntary. So first of all, we have the proof of concept test. We want to make sure that what we have got in mind is workable before we roll it out on an extensive basis. Well, since it is going to be funded by the government, so the data is in the possession of the government. And of course, the data will be opened up to the market, including developers of the mobile applications. Mr. Jeremy Tam. Thank you, Chair. Well, we always found ourselves in a dilemma. You don't like it if we don't give it to you, and yet we are not comfortable. And you start with a permanent post. I find it difficult to decide whether I should support your proposal or not. If I don't say yes, then you will say that we are not supporting you. So we are put on the spot. 2 points here. First of all, relaxing the vehicle length restriction of light buses. It is good because some models just exceed 7 meters. Earlier on, at a meeting of the Bills Committee concerning this matter, I asked this question. For the relaxation to 7.5 meters, what about the existing ones? What about the minibuses plying between routes where there are restrictions on vehicle length, which has been limited at 7M. I just took the taxi license test, so I know. So are you going to change the restriction so that the vehicle length restriction will become 8 meters instead of 7? What I want to say is that there are certain road sections that have a restriction concerning vehicle length. If you don't look at it across the board, then in theory, the minibuses exceeding 7.5 meter in length cannot go to such areas. I absolutely support the idea of relaxing the restriction. But what about the number of we have one just nearby because there are road sections that impose a restriction on vehicle length, namely 7 meters. So have you examined the need to revise the restrictions? And maybe you have to replace them with a length restriction of 7.5 meters. Another question is about ferry service. Well, I'm lucky that I drew the lots, and then the researchers carried out a study in response to my request concerning water taxi service. What is important is to have good connections. You need to have connections with other major means of transport instead of exposing the water taxi passengers to the elements. They used to be a popular service in the vicinity of North Point going to Kwun Tong. I think that used to be a popular one, a successful one. So maybe I'm running out of time, so please answer the question about the 7 meter length restriction traffic signs. And then another question is about the intra-harbor ferry routes, so as to ease the traffic congestion. I'll ask Mr. Kwok to answer the question on the traffic sign.
Now, earlier when we reviewed the case of 19-seat minibuses, we looked at all the interchanges, and we found that for several interchanges, they couldn't be entered into by the 19-seat minibuses. So all the improvement works have been done. So this would not affect the operation of the 7.5 meter minibuses. Now, I'm talking about the streets, not just the minibus stands, Mr. Tony Chair. Of course, there has been an increase in workload and you need more manpower. Basically, I support that. But looking at the job duties, I saw that they will monitor the new measures. Now, public transport is of a very large scope, but this post basically is to oversee the buses. Now, as explained, there are many things for this new post, many duties for this new post. Many of them are just one-off. Of course, not all of them are one-off. Some have to be on a continual basis, but I'm a bit concerned. Now, looking at the Annex 1, the main duties, many of them are one-off duties. Now, once the job is completed, wouldn't be a sharp fall in workload, then the officer may take it at a slow pace because this is a permanent post. So he might just do the work at a slow pace because there are many smart initiatives like smart travel or the real-time arrival information for buses and minibuses. Now they take quite long, over 3 years. The PS explained that there are many procedures. Now apart from workload, I hope that there can be an improvement in efficiency. If now looking at the Annex 1 on the main duties, now I'm concerned that many of the tasks are one-off. So they might just put some duties in there to fill up the time. Now the government can tell us maybe there are some regular duties that have to be on a continual basis. Now maybe that will indicate a very wide scope of duties. Otherwise, I wonder what new duties would be assigned to this officer. P.S. Now, first, I can assure you all that we will not drag our feet in doing our work. We wouldn't go slow in our pace of work. Of course, sometimes in public policies we encounter difficulties and we cannot speed up as we wish. But there are public aspirations and we cannot go slow. Now, looking at the enclosure 1, if you look at the Roman numeral 1, the main duties, now and then there are the long-term duties under Roman numeral 5 to examine the implementation of new initiatives. We have to expand the initiatives. It's not just one-off. Now, for the real-time arrival information, once the information is obtained, how do we enhance our transportation planning? That's a major issue. How to move ahead with the times and provide more and better water taxi service, and how to move forward from a pilot scheme to a long-term service, and also franchise bus safety. That's a long-term work. Now, on franchise buses, now if there are safety measures that prove successful, then that officer will have the duty to apply the experience to non-franchise buses or even minibuses. Of course, we wouldn't stipulate it all in the document, but all this would be continual work. Elizabeth, correct? Now, very often when we talk about new transport initiatives, smart travel, many members of the public would be angry. Now, they can't even get real-time traffic or transport information on the internet. Now, they feel that Hong Kong isn't a real smart city. We can't even do the simple things. As I often said in LegCo, you adopt this consultation mode so that the bus companies and other transport operators offer data on a voluntary basis. You have to wait, I don't know for how long. Now, looking at other cities like New York, they have legislation that mandate the provision of public data, and they can be retrieved on a public platform anonymously. Now, so this is very important for developing smart travel, but the government has been very passive. We've talked about this in LegCo for several years. Now, on the franchise of buses, we said that all these should be stipulated in the contract. You refuse, and then on the contracts you said it's private property, it can't be done. So I don't know how we can achieve a real, genuine smart city. Now we visited the Yangtze River Delta. We saw that at Hangzhou they make use of advanced technology. They have a smart platform where all transport data, or nearly all transport data, progressively put on a single platform, so everyone can see the real-time data, and this helps to control traffic and regulate traffic on a real-time basis. Now, I don't know whether with these new posts you will be able to do a lot more work on smart travel. Now, they do it on the basis of the entire transport network, but you do it on a piecemeal basis. Now, I don't know when you can catch up. If you let you create this new post, how will you be able to catch up and offer genuine smart travel to the public? We are catching up, I wouldn't deny that, but we have been able to show some results recently. You might have noted that we worked with City Bus and the new bus company, that they would open up the data, and New Lantau Bus Company also, and the tramway company the year before last, and MTRCL, I hope we'll have good news before too long. And we are now discussing with the KMB, Kowloon Motor Bus, and they have reacted positively. And if everyone is supportive, then we can install the real-time arrival information for green minibuses. Then the main transport data, public transport data, would be made open. It would be progress. Now, looking at Hangzhou, have you looked at how transport does it? They have not just public transport data, they have parking information. They show where the where people are moving. They can control the various transport routes. They can switch to green lights at crossings for ambulances, and they let people know where there are traffic accidents. So you can have a dashboard, a platform for real-time information and control. So do you have an overall planning in this mode? And also parking spaces too. Yes, we have. The Smart City Blueprint incorporates a large transport portion, and after the smart lamp posts have been installed, there will be more data being collected, and this will help smart travel. Next, Lo Wai Kok. Concerning this establishment proposal for a new post at Transport and Housing Bureau to enhance various transport measures. Now, this seems a good objective, and I am supportive. But members, including myself, have proposed a fourth territory-wide transport strategy study, but the government has declined. There are only studies on individual modes of transport because the past three territory-wide transport strategy studies have all yielded forward-looking breakthroughs, and we are aware of, for instance, the MTR. So the government isn't investing the resources to take a comprehensive look. I fail to understand that. Now, Elizabeth Craig mentioned what was learned and seen at the Yangtze River Delta. Now, I feel the same way. Now, the Hangzhou authorities worked in cooperation, in conjunction with Alibaba, and came up with big data to regulate public transport, and there have been very good results. So for the creation of the post, I'm supportive, but I also hope the government would consider a fourth territory-wide transport strategy study. Now, as for forging a genuine smart city, especially in transport, there are examples that we can refer to. This is the time for action. Otherwise, if we only keep talking but take no action, then I don't know how we can catch up. So I urge the government to be more aggressive in this regard. We thank Mr. Low for his support and comments on smart city and smart travel. For the past few years, the THB and the TD have been working on it. There have been new initiatives. There would be initiatives coming up. As the director said, we will have an in-vehicle unit. If it can be implemented with the community support, we are determined to go ahead, and once that is launched, we can have more data and better traffic management, and maybe you don't have to pay at the parking meter. This will allow people to drive through tunnels, and the free flow toll arrangement. So the government will deduct the cost, the fee, directly from people's accounts. And on smart lampposts, in the next few years, there will be over 500 such lampposts, and as a pilot scheme, and then this will be broadened. Now on smart travel, well, you will see many new measures coming up. As for the CTS, when we undertook CTS 1 through 3, the transport world was simpler. One can cover everything with one major study. And now the scope is too large and too complex. Now, very often we need to take an in-depth look to achieve quick results on a certain area. And so the studies will be complementary, and the results would be more forthcoming. Wu Chi Wai, second round. Thank you, Chairman. Now, I hope the PS would understand. I am very anxious in arguing with you because I see too many cases where posts have been created, but the effectiveness is uncertain. Now, as the PS said, you have a lot of work. Now, it sounds like a lot, but what is done is very little. Now, very often we are reluctant to offer permanent posts because if it's a supernumerary post, every 3 or 5 years, we can check on you and you have to give an account to LegCo and to the public, and the officer cannot just pretend to be busy. So my next question is, now, in your document, you didn't consider a supernumerary post as an option. Now, what you said in the meeting just now, actually, what is to be on a continual basis, that is to increase bus operational safety, and number 2, public transport subsidy. Now, if you rely on those two to support the creation of a new permanent post, I wonder if that is sufficient. If the other 4 items are all basically time limited to some extent. The PS. I thank the member for his frank expression. I have heard him. I also can tell you frankly that we don't lightly create a new permanent post. We have to go through internal checks and examinations. Now, for long-term work, apart from public bus safety and so on, now I also mention other aspects such as for minibuses, the installation of the new information system will be followed up by better use of the information to improve transport planning and improvement of minibus service. Now, with the hardware, we will be able to make use of the information gathered.
For the central home ferry service, it will be offered. And what other services will need to be improved on or offered? All the services, whether they're feasible operation-wide, and would there be financial difficulties? And this is what the post will need to look at. As I just said, what is taxi service? Well, it's a pilot scheme. It's a pilot scheme, and should it become successful, there needs to be a review, and should it be found to be successful, and how to expand that, and that will be the work of the post as well. So I think that's what you need to look at. I know. P.S. But I think, as I said, the information system that it has to be installed is just about how, and also what sort of technology to be used. It's not about whether we'll do it or not. It's about how. Our next second round. I think simply put, I think this poses mainly to implement the transport measures unveiled in the 2018 policy address. So we've been talking about what more to be done after that. I think you need to give us a better account. I'd like to now talk about the public transport fare subsidy scheme. You're saying that, well, it's underway, of course, already. So what more is left to be done? What more is left? What does it have to do with this post? Well, because... Oh, sorry, maybe I'll ask Mr. Choi. Yes. How? In the long run? Well, what needs to be done in the long run? Mr. Choi, please. P.S. Yes, I think for the public transport fare subsidy scheme, it's just been launched, and its implementation has been smooth so far. And we did put a lot of effort into designing the scheme, and we need colleagues to join in the work. And just then the PS elaborated on the scheme already. But anyway, for the overall scheme, the electrical urged us to promise that a year after the scheme was implemented, we need to do a thorough review. And we have identified the direction and areas of review. Firstly, that is right now, with after discussions with electrical, we find that it should not just cover all buses and other major public transport. We've also covered kaidos and minibuses. So how are you going to support the scheme? That's also what the post will cover. And also for the costs, most people in Hong Kong use Octopus, but for other electronic payment methods, they have arisen. And so we are determined to see that the scheme will not be limited to Octopus. So we're going to continue with our review. And we also understand, and we've also heard from LESCO that the scope of the subsidy or the amount of subsidy should be subject to review. Now the scheme has only been up and running for 3 months. Okay, for the amount of subsidy, well, you made some points earlier on. You mentioned that, I know, in your answer to other members, but for the subsidy scheme itself, I've noticed that there's an issue with it, that is often the scheme covers cross-border services, transport services. And I'm sure you're offering, the subsidy amount would be a lot more for the cross-border transport services. So that means the rate of subsidy will be much higher than other forms of transport. So the review a year later, my personal opinion is that the review should cover the rate of subsidy for various modes of transport. For example, for the Eastern Rail subsidy, you can find out how much of it covers cross-border transport service. And a year from now on, you need to, through that review, consider what is worth covering. That's my view for the scheme. P.S. Simple answer, maybe. Yes, thank you for your view. Just a correction here. We don't cover cross-border transport, but I think Mr. Au was talking about Israel to the service to Lowu, to the border area. I understand what you meant. Okay. Next one, Jeremy Tam, second round. Thank you, Chairman. I'll give the two officials from the Transport Department to answer my previous question. Okay, Director, please. Yes. When we reviewed the 19-seat minibus, we also reviewed all minibus routes. As I said, all the minibus stops, if necessary, we can do improvement works. And we've done that. We've carried out improvement works. And for the road signs, when we change the route, we would review all the routes covered and whether there are any road signs that need to be amended as well. So you don't have information offhand how many potential road signs that need to be improved on. You don't have the information now, or the transport department doesn't have it at all. The TD has a database that shows the road signs and the locations of restricted areas in various routes. So the TD has the information. So the reason why I asked is because back in more than a year ago, I said it's okay for you to change the road signs, but you need to change the 7-meter signs to 7.5-meter sign or what? Or for the 7-meter, what are the conditions for limiting it, changing the 7-meter bus to 7.5 meters, 7.5-meter wide buses? Have you done any study on the condition for change in the size? I'll try to answer it first. Earlier on, what we did was that we carry out a simple review, an inspection to see which road sections, which bus stops can accommodate longer minibuses. And if possible, for safety purpose, particularly in the terminus, we have carried out some fine-tuning work to accommodate minibuses with longer or wider body. But if you can't accommodate, you can't accommodate it. For example, if in the roundabout, it can only accommodate 7-meter wide bus, if no accommodation can be made, then that's the fact. I think what we need to ask, our engineering department staff would ask, is that whether there can be minor operation done. P.S. Well, if no operation is possible, then that means that minibuses beyond the width of 7 meters would not be able to fit in there. My question was whether you have done the adjustment work. You have identified in Hong Kong, across Hong Kong, which sports can accommodate or not accommodate the minibuses. My answer I got was like you were not sure. The problem is not just to cover the routes of green minibuses. You have to look at all the minibus stops in Hong Kong, because you have red minibuses in Hong Kong too. So if the roads are limit the pose limitations on 7-meter bus, or is only available or open to 7-meter minibuses only. I just want to know. It may seem simple, is that 7 meters to 7.5 meters seems something simple, but it's not simple at all. You just need to tell me whether you had accommodated non-7-meter minibuses or not. And then you answer me saying that you cover all the routes. But in my first round, I told you why I had to ask the question. Can you just give me a definite answer? That is, you had considered the provisions for 7-meter minibuses or what? Mr. Choi. Thank you for the question. I am Ms. Kwok trying to answer. Basically, this is not. Mr. Tan was right in saying that there are details, not just roundabouts, but we need to consider the parking spaces for red minibuses. If it's only we have looked at the detail, even for parking spaces for red minibuses to accommodate, the size of minibus. We have looked at the detail. There are 3 more members in the queue. Can we extend the meeting by 15 minutes to deal with this item? Yes? Okay. All right. So I'll draw a line after these 3 members have spoken. You see, in second round. Well, in the government's letter in response to our query, it has said that it would monitor the situation. And in the paper, in response to my question, I was asking about the China to Hong Kong ferry and water taxi service. My understanding is that the post will deal with the new service and arrangements associated with it, and the post will also look at any new issues arising from the services in the future. So is it that the post will not look at other kinds of ferry services and other piers? If that's the case, as I mentioned, Kwun Tong Pier asked the Kwun Tong public pier right now, even now, there's a lot of street slippers there, present there, and has the transport department told them that to leave? Well, and the department took a picture of the pier where without the street slippers. But then the next day, after the picture was taken, the street slippers returned. There are even more of them there now than before. So if that's the case, if the post would not look at the street slippers issue, then who at the transport department would address the issue? And in the future, how about other piers? Would there be a huge presence of street slippers at public piers in the future? If so, then how the government is going to deal with the matter? So 2 questions. One is on besides these ferry services, is that the post will not look at other services? Mr. Choi? Okay, thank you for the question. In this post, for this post in particular, we mentioned the Central Hong Kong ferry route and the water taxi service as part of his work. But it's because water taxi is something new and it would need to be dealt with flexibility. And why do we also mention Central Hong Kong ferry? Because we want to use the Hong Kong South pier as the base for the water taxi service, because water taxi service is also a kind of cross-border service, so we need an anchor for it before other service points are launched. So therefore, the new post would focus on the water taxi and the Hong Kong South pier, but we do also have other colleagues at the same rank to handle other ferry services, because we need to look at the long-term operation of ferry services too. So basically, it's me who will be responsible, but we have 2 different colleagues to look at the ferry issue and make sure that they will have an equal division of work. And as for peers, that is part of our work as well, because there is different works related to peers. So I asked the transport department to supplement what are we going to do with public peers and the progress made so far. Director, as for public piers, the TD is responsible for managing them, and when we found that there is a need for maintenance or other issues, we would, together with other government departments, carry out joint actions. As for the issue of street slippers, we will ask our relevant colleagues to carry out follow-up work. Of course, it's difficult to resolve, I know, but you do need to have a regular action or work to tackle the issue, because Kwun Tong is where there could be a lot of tourists, and so you need to find a long-term solution, because that could affect our image if the issue is left unresolved. Would you like third round? 2 points here, Chairman. 1, following up on what I said in the first 2 rounds, I meant that I know it's rare to see the government creating a permanent post and then turning it into supernumerary later on. But having looked at the entire paper, I find that it's more appropriate to have a supernumerary post instead. I hope they can really pay attention to my point on that. If you're not going to, change the permanent post into supernumerary post instead, so please, from paragraph 9 and 10 onwards, the content of the work. I want to see an actual breakdown of the work, timetable and roadmap. I want to see more a detailed account. I don't just want to hear from you verbally alone what you're going to do, what the work would involve. But we don't know whether it will all be done, and some work may be carried out, but we're not sure what actually the post will cover. I want to see an actual timetable and roadmap to see now with the post is created. Now with the post created, when you will get what you want to achieve done. We want to set a timetable, and also by some points in time, what can be expected to be done. So you need to give electrical the information. I do respect Mr. Wu's point. Your request. I think after the meeting, we will give you the answer information in writing. Jeremy Tam, third round. Thank you. I'd just like the administration to answer my question on water transport. Just then I was saying, well, the Electrical Research Division has done the report. I hope you can make reference to that. The report done by the Research Division, Electrical Research Division, and water taxi service is one thing, but for the entire water transport across Victoria Harbour, what is your thinking? What comes after the water taxi is offered? Are you going to have large-scale water taxi service, or are you going to provide a lot of routes, or what? The biggest issue is with the pier. Now with the relocation of the central pier, there are issues. The most important is the facilities of the piers and also connectivity between piers. Or is it going to provide some parking spaces, car parks along the piers so that people can, after they take the taxi or ferry, they can get on board or get into the car and then they can drive to the destinations from the pier? Okay, PS or DS. Just then, what you're saying is exactly what. When we organize the pilot scheme, that's exactly what we need to discuss with the potential operators. And also during the process of the pilot scheme, we need to look at the overall picture. If the scheme is successful, we hope that it can be continued and be extended widely, because Victoria Harbour is such a beautiful site in Hong Kong. And if there's anyone who likes to use water taxi or the ordinary ferry, and that will ease the traffic load on the roads, because many people are using road transport unless there are lots of taxis and ferries. Otherwise, if you want to ease the heavy traffic congestion on roads, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to be achieved. But we will see, and because water transport is feasible and green after all. As for what piers to be built, Hong Kong has quite a number of public piers or landing steps or public landing steps. Simple pier facility in Hong Kong, quite a number of them in Hong Kong. But because water taxis can only accommodate a few number of people, those using water taxi can use the smaller piers or the landing steps. They all belong to the government, but we need to review how to improve on the support measures for them or support facilities for them.
If no other members would like to speak, and since I've also drawn a line, I will put the matter to the vote. Show of hands, please, if you're in favor. All members are in favor. No objection. So I declare that the paper has been endorsed. Would you like to have it voted on separately? No. The Bureau will provide information after the meeting as requested by members. I declare the meeting adjourned. Till when? On the 7th of May, between 2:30 and 6:30 p.m. 4 hours again. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.